Welcome to From Chaos to Code, Rebuilding the Iron Mind, where we talk about the real side of men's health. Not the Instagram highlight reel, not the fake stoicism, but the honest effects that happen when life hits you harder than any workout ever could. I'm your host, Ricardo, and I've lived a few different lives. Teacher, property manager, MMA promoter, garage mechanic, handyman, empath. I've been the man everyone leans on, the one who fixes things. Until the weight of it all almost broke me. Here, we want to talk about what that really costs. When being the strong one becomes survival instead of strength. How burnout, silence, and pride slowly eat away at you until you realize you've built armor so thick that you can't even breathe under it. This isn't about weakness, it's about rebuilding. Learning that real strength isn't about how much you can carry. It's about knowing when to set it down. So let's start there, with the cost of being the strong one and what it actually takes to reclaim your iron mind. Welcome back to From Chaos to Code. Today we're going to be talking about something I've mentioned a few times in some of the other podcasts, but it's definitely something that needs to be understood in order to understand why we are driven and built the way we are. The title of today's podcast is Dopamine, Cortisol, and Control. Why men get hooked on the quick hit. Now let's talk about this. Let's talk about this idea of addiction. So the invisible addiction that happens. Now, everybody has their fix. For some, it's nicotine. For others, it's the phone, the scrolling, whatever that next rush might be, or the constant grind. Now, most of us don't even realize how much of our discipline is quietly turned into dependency. Now, I started using nicotine, I smoked when I was a teenager, but I started using nicotine again when I was in a very poor relationship at the beginning of this year. Now, I thought it was something that was going to help me in the gym, 3 milligrams while working out, and it did. It absolutely did. But I realized I was also using it to get the dopamine hits that this shit relationship was not giving me. Now, I saw direct impacts using these nicotine pouches. I'm still crushing Zins on the daily because of this strike and me having time off work, but I see the effects and somehow I'm still not really giving it up. I did earlier in the year, but I guess I'm back on. I see that it is not giving me as much of a pump in the gym. If I use it too late, I am stimulated. My sleep isn't as good. It's not as deep for sure. I'm not putting on the lean muscle I should at this point. Now, I'm not losing muscle mass, but I'm not putting on the muscle that equivalates to my diet and exercise regimen. So I see right away that there's issues, and I'm thinking to myself, why the hell am I still using this? So it's not really sharpening me at this point. It's kind of owning me. And I realize that these cravings aren't so much about enjoyment, although some of the flavors are amazing. It's more about escape. So this episode isn't about judgment. It's about understanding what's actually happening inside your body and how that invisible cycle can hijack your purpose, your discipline, and your code. So let's talk about the physiology of dopamine, how motivation really works. So what the hell is dopamine? We need to slow this down for a second because dopamine is turned into one of those words people throw around without really knowing what it means. Now, I didn't really understand dopamine until I had a genetic test done a few years ago when I was suffering from long COVID. And one of the variant alleles I have in my genetic code means that I produce very little dopamine. I just don't naturally produce it. So part of my intense behavior in life is actually trying to find ways to fulfill this deficiency that I naturally have. Now, I could do this in a healthy way, or I could do it in a somewhat detrimental way. Now, dopamine isn't happiness. Just because I have a deficiency doesn't mean I'm not happy. It doesn't mean it's a lack of pleasure or satisfaction or joy. Dopamine's none of those things. What it is it is a neurotransmitter, a chemical messenger your brain uses to communicate between neurons. Think of it like your brain's motivation currency. It tells your body that that thing felt good. Do it again. And when your brain releases dopamine, it's basically tagging an experience as important for survival. So thousands of years ago, that meant food, that meant water, sex, or protection. But today we still have those same fires. The system still fires the same, but now we light it up differently. We light it up for social media likes. Caffeine hits, my 3 cups a day in the morning. Could be nicotine, could be porn, video games, or also in my case, endless work. And our systems didn't evolve for this modern overload that we've created. So let me give you a short version of how dopamine actually works. First off, there's the anticipation phase, and this is the chase. Now, dopamine releases before you get the reward. It's when you're chasing it. That's why you feel excited on the way to the gym. It's not just the pre-workout, or right before a smoke break, or just as you're about to check your phone. The brain fires dopamine to motivate action. And that's what leads us into the second phase, which is the reward phase, like getting the hit. So when you actually get the thing, that message, that taste, the lift, dopamine spikes again briefly. You feel pleasure, focus, satisfaction, and after that is the third phase, which is the crash, that drop. Because after that spike, dopamine dips below your baseline for a while. And that drop is what people feel as boredom or some sort of come down. Now, it's supposed to rebalance you, this crash. It's not a bad thing. But when you're chasing another hit immediately, you never really recover. And over time, if you keep triggering those spikes without giving your brain a chance to reset, 2 big things happen. First off, your receptors start to desensitize. Now, someone like me with low dopamine in the first place means I'm already very low sensitivity. When you desensitize, your brain says this stimulus isn't special anymore. So it starts to release less dopamine each time. You stop getting satisfaction from the exact same things. That's why that first cigarette hits different. Or the first time you're crushing it in the gym, you get that pump. It's unmatched because your system was fresh for that stimulation. Now, the second thing that happens is your baseline dopamine lowers. That means that your normal starts to feel flat, dull, or anxious. And this is what we're going to talk about today. You're not depressed. You're depleted because you've trained your brain to expect constant stimulation. So quiet moments feel uncomfortable or even painful. Now, we're talking about a specific type of men here. So what happens when dopamine depletion meets a high-risk lifestyle? So when you've lived an intense life, that could be military, firefighting, combat sports, any sort of emergency response, what other types of organized chaos you might have grown up in, your brain actually gets trained to live in extremes. So that adrenaline plus the cortisol plus the dopamine, that all equals laser focus and survival. It feels alive in a way that everyday life can't touch. You're not some sort of regular. You're not just chasing dopamine, though, at this point. You're living inside its highest gear. Most people don't ever get to this level. Every shift, every mission, every fight floods you with adrenaline, cortisol, and dopamine at once. That's the chemistry of focus, urgency, and survival. Now, that combination makes you feel alive in a way that normal life never can. Interesting enough, I found out during this genetic test I have something called the warrior gene. Now, it sounds cool. Kind of is, but only in certain situations. This means that I have a double variant allele in my genetic code. And when I encounter extreme situations, my body dumps all my hormones at once in order to be able to handle that situation. That's why I'm very calm under stress. If it's intensity, I'm usually able to last through it because my body dumps every single hormone there is. The problem is, then I burn out very, very fast because you've just depleted your entire system. And it gets to the point where if you're involved in this so often, where you have this consistent, intense lifestyle, your nervous system can't actually tell the difference between danger and demand. It only knows on or off. Let's face it, lots of us, we've been on for years. Your body doesn't really know how to reset now. It stays on non-stop, and if it stays on long enough and it forgets how to downshift, quiet feels wrong. Now, I took some of that information from the New England Journal of Medicine. It was an article called Stress Allostasis Fundamentals by McEwen. So I'm going to lightly reference some material here, but I encourage you at the very end of the podcast or during to go to my YouTube description and check out the references I've used at the bottom for the more expert commentary on what I'm discussing today. So when we get back to that idea of staying on all the time, it becomes a problem. Because when the noise finally stops, the sirens, the crowd, call-outs, chaos, whatever it is, your dopamine baseline has already shifted down. That means that everyday life feels flat. Gym doesn't hit like it used to. No matter how stimulated you are at work, you're bored. Conversations feel dull. Your relationship might feel boring. Stillness feels like suffocation. So when all the craziness stops and life goes silent, but you've trained your baseline dopamine to be low, your stress system is trained for urgency. So stillness feels and lands like suffocation. Now, that's not weakness. You're not weak. You're not broken. That's allostatic load. That's your body having recalibrated to intensity. You've trained it for intensity. You're not weak, okay? Once again, you're not broken. You're biochemically recalibrated to intensity. Your brain's reward system got wired around crisis, risk, adrenaline, around purpose tied to survival. And when that's gone, quiet feels wrong. It's the same as going from a very intense toxic relationship to a regular one that's healthy that feels boring. And that's why a lot of men from places like us struggle with transition. We chase chaos because chaos feels familiar. So it's not about being addicted to danger, something poetic. It's about addiction to feeling alive. We've taught our bodies to release dopamine in response to threat, not in response to peace. So when we finally get some sort of stillness, there's no chemical reward. We get anxiety, we get boredom, we get restlessness. It's not depression. It's dopamine depletion combined with cortisol conditioning. We'll talk about cortisol coming up. This means that your nervous system is constantly asking, where's the mission? Where's the hit? Where's that fight? So if you don't build some sort of structure to replace that, your nervous system is going to start creating its own, either through arguments, overworking, self-sabotage, or destructive habits that mimic that feeling of intensity. That's why you see so many men from high-risk worlds go one of two ways. They either burn out, or what we're going to help you do here, they rebuild. Now, the ones who rebuild learn to create controlled intensity through training, hanging out with the boys, breath work, could be some sort of cold exposure, something extreme like that, or creative sort of missions that still require focus and frictions. We're not looking for comfort. But instead, we want you to learn to stop chasing chaos and earn calm. Let's face it, calm isn't natural after a high-risk lifestyle. You need to train to be calm, just like everything else. You don't just flip a switch and come down from that kind of life. Your nervous system doesn't know off. It has to be retrained, okay? Slowly, deliberately. You have to find meaning and stability in quiet. Again, this is what I'm actively trying to do, and it's a struggle every single day. But when I hit those moments, man, it is amazing. So that's the real challenge here. Not learning how to survive chaos, we know how to do that. We need to learn how to live without chaos. So we're going to talk about that later in this episode, on how to rebuild your reward system, replace that external mission with an internal one, and retrain the mind to find intensity and stillness, not just chaos. So let's pair this with another hormone we need to talk about. We need to talk about cortisol, because cortisol and dopamine are partners in crime. They both drive alertness and energy. So when you're in constant pursuit, cortisol rises to keep you active. But if you never recover, your cortisol stays elevated. Your sleep tanks, inflammation rises, testosterone dips, and mental clarity disappears. This is that brain fog, and that's why you feel wired but tired. You're sharp for an hour, drained for the next. You're living in a loop of dopamine spikes and cortisol surges with no baseline calm. And I'm sure that as I say that, it speaks to a lot of you. So, let's say it in plain language. Dopamine tells you what to chase. Cortisol gives you the energy to chase it, but without rest and recovery, they both burn out. And that's when discipline turns into dependency. Now let's talk about cortisol, that quiet killer of focus and stability. It's the other half of this chemical loop that most people don't really understand. Now, cortisol gets a bad reputation, but it's not evil. It's a survival hormone. When you get up in the morning, your cortisol should spike. And this is where you hear people like Huberman and other specialists talk about getting sunlight exposure in the first 30 minutes of each day. I have a little sun lamp I have while I stretch and work out in the mornings. I just turn it on and it spikes my cortisol up. That's not a bad thing, because if it spikes up high at the beginning of the day to get you ready for the day, it also tapers down so that you're able to sleep well at the end of the day. It's what gets you to sharpen your senses in the morning. It gives you that drive when something demands your attention, but it has to taper down. Now, two things can happen if you don't control your cortisol. Either you're getting ridiculous spikes throughout the day and you can't come down, or once you burn out and deplete, and we'll talk about this coming up, it doesn't spike in the morning. You don't get it up to where you should. And so all day you just have that burnt out, tired feeling. Now, in short bursts, cortisol is useful. It's part of that fight or flight response that keeps you alive under pressure, and it's not the villain. It's a survival hormone that mobilizes energy, sharpens attention under pressure. So in short bursts, it's useful. The problem is when your system never shuts off, when you have all these modern micro stressors, cravings, unfinished tasks, notifications, it keeps that threat circuit idling super hot. So when you live in constant pursuit and you're chasing dopamine hits all day, your brain keeps signaling danger even when there isn't any. So every notification, craving, unfinished tasks, it fires that same stress circuitry designed for life and death moments. That means your adrenal glands keep pumping cortisol, keeps telling your body, stay alert, stay ready, don't relax. And what happens is eventually, if you stay in this lifestyle, you'll go through adrenal fatigue. And this is where these glands are so burnt out, you're hardly even putting forth cortisol. So at first when this is happening, it feels like energy, all right? When your adrenal glands first pump it up, you get that wired, high output version of yourself who can push through anything. But over time, very high cortisol flips. It changes from fuel to friction. Now, here's what that looks like in real life. I tried to pick out specific examples that you might be feeling because I felt them too. Your focus becomes very short range, so you can grind for an hour, but your patience disappears fast. You can't really stay with one task long enough to finish it because your brain just jumps to the next one. No, you don't have ADHD. I mean, you might. What it is it's just that cortisol intensity. Now, this is where I see it really come into play. My sleep becomes fragmented. Cortisol is supposed to peak in the morning and taper off at night. So when it stays elevated, your nervous system doesn't know when to power down. You fall asleep wired, you wake up tired. If you ever track your deep sleep, there's some nights that I get 8 hours, but I look and I only got 15, 20 minutes of deep sleep. I feel like garbage even though I've been passed out for 8 hours. But that's because my body's staying on alert throughout the night. And then what eventually happens, and you can probably feel this in yourself when it starts to, is your testosterone drops. So chronically high cortisol suppresses your GnRH, your gonadotropin releasing hormone, and that directly lowers your testosterone production. That means less recovery, less libido, you're not waking up hard, and less drive. By the way, I'll talk about things like TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, in future podcasts, and why it's being pushed so heavily. Majority of the time, testosterone replacement therapy is being pushed when some small lifestyle changes can create the exact same effect naturally. So, another aspect of that high, intense cortisol pumping out all day is you get inflammation and your irritability rises. So cortisol is supposed to be an anti-inflammatory in short bursts, give you that energy, but when it's always high, your immune system starts to fight back. If you have those constant body aches, if you have brain fog, if you're irritable, that's the cortisol. And then what happens eventually is your emotional control weakens. So high cortisol shrinks the prefrontal cortex's regulation over the amygdala. In other words, You react before you think. Small annoyances feel like disrespect. You lose that calm that defines real strength. And here's the kicker. If you're chasing dopamine, well, dopamine and cortisol feed each other. Dopamine says, chase the reward. Cortisol says, you better get it or you'll pay for it. That's why even when you're winning, when you hit the reps, you make the money, you land the deal, you check your phone, it doesn't give you relief. The system's still running. You're stuck in what's called chronic pursuit mode. You start to live in a permanent low-grade fight or flight state. Your heart rate never really drops. Your breathing stays shallow. Your brain interprets stillness as danger because it's been trained to equate peace with loss of control. I can think of personal examples where I've had this too. I can think of some mainstream ones, such as when I had a rental property that was just sewering me every single month. And because I was losing so much money on this, it was constant stress. Every moment had to be making sure that I wasn't going to bleed out more money. Now, when I finally sold this property, I had the greatest sleep of my life. It was amazing, fantastic, the deepest, most relaxing sleep ever. Same thing as, like I mentioned, I was in a shit relationship, just walking on eggshells all the time, and I thought that it was the nicotine that I was using that was amplifying my resting heart rate up by about 10 beats. Now, nicotine was contributing slightly to that, but when I got out of that relationship, my heart rate naturally came down. I didn't have that constant cortisol. So, if you're asking yourself, I don't know why I'm so tense all the time, it's not weakness. We're not weak here. It's your neurochemistry out of balance. So when we talk about burnout, anxiety, irritability, or, I know a lot of us have had this, that emotional flatness, this is what's underneath it. It's not laziness, it's not lack of willpower, it's your nervous system that's been redlined for way too long. Now, what's the problem in this? Well, that's where we look for quick fixes. Nicotine, caffeine, social media, this is where those things step in. Because when cortisol makes you restless and dopamine makes you crave, those instant hits feel like control again. So for a few minutes, the chemistry balances out until the crash hits and that cycle restarts. Let's talk about those things. I've told you about dopamine, I've told you about cortisol and the effects it can have, but we exponentially make this worse with things like nicotine or scrolling or trying to find some sort of modern fix, whatever that might be. So once that dopamine cortisol loop is running, that constant tension between craving and stress, the body does what it's designed to do. It looks for relief. And relief is easy because we can usually get it fast and cheap. That's why the world feels like it runs on small stimulants now. Nicotine, caffeine, energy drinks, social media. I can't believe I'm back on social media. I went back on, and yes, I enjoy reconnecting with people, but I can feel my stillness being affected by it. It's all those tiny little hits, those microbursts of focus. It's easy access, it's no friction, and they work. For a little bit. You get your hit, dopamine spikes, your mind clears. You scroll, novelty gives you a hint of excitement. I love work, but it's a coping mechanism. I answer that one more email at midnight and I feel productive, but it's not actual productivity. It's anesthesia. Let's talk about a few of these. I'll talk about definitely nicotine because that's something near and dear to my heart at the moment. So the physiology of what's happening with that. When nicotine enters your system, it binds to acetylcholine receptors. So the same ones that drive attention and alertness. And that triggers the release of dopamine and adrenaline almost instantly. So yes, nicotine does help you focus because your nervous system just went into mild fight or flight. Your heart rate rises, your blood pressure ticks up, cortisol follows. But it's not a calm focus. It's a stimulated focus. In the moment the chemical fades, dopamine drops below baseline again. Now you feel flat, unfocused, maybe even anxious, so you chase the next one. 3 milligram pouches used to do it for me. I'd be absolutely buzzed off the thing. I had to take it out. It was giving me the nickups. Now, as 6 hardly phases me, I'll crush them back to back. And I mean, I'd be using the 14s or 16s if they didn't knock me out so badly. So I mentioned nicotine, but I'm back on social media. That means I'm on my phone a lot more. And every scroll is that micro dopamine event. A new face, new headline, new joke, new message, new rack. Each one is novelty. And your brain loves novelty. But when novelty has no cost, it stops being a reward. It just becomes noise. And the more noise you feed your brain, the harder it becomes to feel anything real. So then when it's time to do the things that used to give you meaning, training, working, leading, connecting, you can't feel it. You're overstimulated, but you're undersatisfied. You're wired and you're numb at the same time. So, this is what I call chemical burnout. Your brain's still hunting, but that hunt no longer feeds you. Now, why are we chasing this quick hit? I just talked about how it's detrimental. We don't reach for these things because we're weak. We do reach for them because for a few seconds they work. But they're giving us the illusion of control. And I've talked in past podcasts about my need for control and how I have to give it up to understand how to be fully in control. So if you're like me and you grew up in chaotic environments, whether that's physical, emotional, environmental, any sort of control meant safety. So when the world feels unpredictable, when you're stressed, you find something predictable. The vape, the phone, the next task, the constant motion. Each one delivers a small, reliable hit. A moment where you know exactly what's coming, and predictability feels safe because we've trained ourselves that stillness doesn't. And that's the trap. When your nervous system starts to associate calm with threat, the rest stops feeling peaceful. Rest starts feeling dangerous. So, men like us, we end up staying in motion, not because we love chaos, but because stopping feels like falling. I mentioned this to a psychologist one time. I said, I love high stimulation environments. Put me in a rave, put me in a nightclub, put me in a bad situation, put me on a bike, put me in a fast car. Doesn't mean I love the chaos. He told me that it's me not being able to understand how to rest and feel peaceful. Here's the truth. We don't reach for these habits out of pleasure. We reach for control. So when life feels unstable emotionally, financially, relationally, the brain craves some sort of predictability. Quick dopamine hits give the illusion of control. Scroll, smoke, swipe, repeat. Tiny wins. There's no risk. There's no vulnerability. Once again, it's not you having some sort of moral failure. It's a neurological fatigue. You've trained your brain to avoid the stillness because stillness feels unsafe. So if you're someone who's lived in high adrenaline worlds, if you're one of those people that runs towards chaos instead of away from it, your baseline's already set way high. You're not a regular. Your stress hormones, especially cortisol, stay elevated longer than most people's. That means it takes less stimulation to keep you hooked and a lot more effort to feel calm. Once again, I'll talk about genetics. I learned that I'm genetically predisposed to not being able to come down from these high intensity moments. It takes me a long time. So if I'm stimulating myself past that, trying to find some sort of control, I'm making it exponentially worse. But if you're not like me and you haven't had this genetic predisposition to not being able to come down, you can still train yourself where you have this high baseline, where it takes less stimulation to keep you hooked and a lot more effort to feel calm. So you keep chasing, not because you want to, but because your system forgot how to stop. And that's not something you out-discipline. That's something you have to retrain. So let's talk about how to do that. Let's talk about how to retrain. What you have to do is not cut out all the stimulation. That's unreasonable. That doesn't work. All you have to do is own it. That means use stimulation with intention, not as sedation. So I tried this recently in Portugal, but I slipped up. I was not using pouches for a long while because I broke out of that. It was good. I was starting to calm more, but I knew that in certain environments, I could use them and it would expand the effect. So when I was visiting Portugal, I was looking at very scenic areas. I'd pop in a pouch and it would kind of heighten it for me. And that was fine. In fact, I was only bringing 1 or 2 with me a day when I was out. Then I started to bring the entire container. Then I crushed that puck, and then I just bought them wherever I found. So I slipped up. That's okay. But now, when I'm using any sort of stimulation, I'm trying to come out of this. I'm trying to retrain again. I'm asking myself, am I reaching for this because I want to perform? In other words, am I using it because it's a place I've never been and I'm trying to heighten the experience? When I used it in the gym, it actually caused me to perform at really low doses. But then I ask myself, am I using it because I'm just avoiding stillness? So back to the theme of the podcast, does this actually amplify my code or does it numb it? So if it's amplifying focus, creativity, purpose, good, that's aligned with your code. If it's numbing you, dulling you, delaying your real work, it's addiction dressed as discipline. And here's the truth. The problem isn't that we seek stimulation. It's that we stop earning it. Dopamine's natural purpose is to reward the effort, not the ease of something. When you retrain that pattern, your drive, your patience, your focus, they all come back online. So people who've lived on the edge need friction. It's how the system stays calibrated. The trick is to make it intentional friction, not chaotic. You can create that friction, cold exposure, strength training, any sort of martial arts, sprints. Do something once a day that's uncomfortable on purpose. Take the stairs. Make that hard call. Finish the thing you've been avoiding. Every deliberate act of discomfort gives your brain earned dopamine. So it's that same satisfaction it used to get from crisis, but without the collateral damage. So effort becomes the new high. I'm going to say that again. Effort becomes the new high. That's what we want. Controlled intensity. So, out there, you had chaos handed to you. Now, whatever your mission is, you have to define it yourself. Ask yourself, who am I serving now? What needs discipline in my life right now? What's one action that aligns with both? So the goal isn't trying to find adrenaline that spikes, it's trying to find purpose that anchors you down. When effort reconnects with service, dopamine rises naturally through meaning, not chaos. I've talked about me being on strike right now. I'm not teaching. I have lots of purpose through service when I'm teaching, and right now I'm trying to find ways to recreate that in a healthy sense, but I'm finding it by changing car tires for people, doing oil changes, helping people move. I have some sort of purpose that's giving me effort. But it's not that cheap sort of purpose. That's what I'm finding I'm getting when I'm home, bored at night and crushing nicotine. I'm trying to retrain my nervous system for calm. Because if you have that intensity without recovery, it burns you out. So you need to build recovery almost like a drill. If you've ever heard of box breathing or physiological sighs, breath work, it actually resets your nervous system in under a minute. I talked about sunlight earlier. You can take morning walks to regulate dopamine and cortisol. If you don't, get a sun lamp. Sometimes they call it a happy light. Put it on in the morning, do a little bit of work, stretch, whatever you need to do, it's good. Now, this is the one that I find hard. Be still. Right now, I want to go to the gym because I feel as if I should, but I've already worked out in the morning. I've already changed tires and done work in the garage. I'm tired. But it's just my body wanting to do something. So I'm trying to force myself to be still. Later on, I'll sit there and I'll try to have no phone, no noise. And it's going to be tough at first. It's going to feel like punishment, but that's just that withdrawal. That's my brain relearning that quiet isn't a threat. So, discipline is the new rush. The gym, journaling, morning routine. Think of not chasing adrenaline anymore. You're trying to earn your clarity. You're trying to break the loop and rewire that reward system. Now, I'm sorry. There's no magic reset. You can't inject something. You can't crush something. You can't do one action that's going to reset everything. It's repetition. Breaking addiction to chaos, nicotine, dopamine loops, it all comes down to friction, substitution, and purpose. So, anytime you're looking for a cheap fix, add friction to it. Make your hits cost something. So if you vape, keep it in another room. If you scroll, leave your phone across the house while you're doing something else. Every second of delay reclaims control, and that's what we're here to do. We're teaching your brain that you decide the timing, not the craving. You can substitute with effort. So when that urge hits, do something else. Try and get dopamine the right way. Get down, do some push-ups, go drink some cold water, get under the cold water, stretch, journal, breath work. I know it sounds like hippie shit, but there's a reason they're so relaxed. Effort-based reward builds stability, not dependency. Nobody owns you. I've said this before, I'll say it again. Schedule recovery. Don't just say, I'll sleep when I'm dead, I'll rest when it's over. No. Make time for rest. Set a cutoff time for screens. Dim the lights before bed. Walk slowly after work instead of reaching for a screen. Predictable rest lowers cortisol. It lifts natural motivation. Here's what I need to do. Track your hits. Write down every stimulant like you'd log reps. So, however many coffees you're having a day, write it down. However many pouches you're having, however many hits of the vape, however many times you've been on your phone, take a look at the timer, see how much time you use on every app. You can't fix what you don't track. But in order to become disciplined, we need to be aware. And this is where we're going to redefine reward. Stop celebrating escape. Losing yourself in your phone isn't what we're looking for. You want to be able to start celebrating consistency. I say I work out every single morning. I do, absolutely. And I work out in the afternoons majority of the days, but my morning workouts are the consistency I need. Now, if I'm sick or burnt out, I'll change it into something else. But I think there was 1 year I only missed 2 morning workouts the entire year. And that was a good reward. That was consistency. Now I'll reward myself for small things. If I have some sort of urge and I don't do it, good. Small wins. You're not punishing yourself. You're teaching your system to find satisfaction in progress again. Now, we're men. We're men built on adrenaline and we need order. This podcast is for those of you that have lost a little bit of that order. Maybe you've hit a wall. Maybe you're a bit lost in general. Order is what we're looking for, because without it, the brain goes looking for chaos to fill the space. Build a structure you can trust. Wake, train, eat, reflect, sleep, same sequence every day. Have some sort of structure. Predictability lowers cortisol. Repetition builds safety, and safety brings your baseline dopamine back to center. Not too high, not too low. And when that happens, the rest of your life stops swinging between these extremes. You're not trying to chase highs anymore. You're living in rhythm. Now, I'll close on this. I know it's been a longer podcast, but I had to get so much out in this one because it's the basis of almost everything we're discussing. You can't out-discipline a body that's addicted to chaos. You have to retrain it. And this is how you do it, through friction, structure, and meaning. You're not trying to erase the intensity, you're refining it. Let's face it, men like us, we don't need less fire. We just need to learn how to aim it properly. Thanks for listening today. Obrigado. That's it for today's episode of From Chaos to Code, Rebuilding the Iron Mind. If something in this hit you, take a second to sit with it before you scroll away. Write it down. Apply it. Share it with a brother who might need to hear it. The whole goal here isn't perfection, it's progress. Real men doing the real work of getting stronger, clearer, and more grounded every day. If you want to keep these conversations going, subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen, And if you want to stay around after the episode, I'll be releasing tracks I've made using my own writing and AI music development. Each episode will feature a new track in a variety of genres that I use to express myself. Keep the chaos in check and keep the code alive. I appreciate all of you. Thanks for listening.
I've seen the lights of every city dance through doors I never earned, played the part, lived without pity, but something changed the day you turned. You walked in like time had stumbled, and I forgot my clever lines. The world went soft, the noise all crumbled, and I've been standing here since I saw your Now I'm waiting on the steps of desire, with a heart I thought I'd long retire. Never knew I'd wanna build a life so slow. Never dreamed I'd ache just watching someone go. So I wait here, not lost, just sure that I could have the world, but I'd still want yours. I've had the nights, the highs, the glamour. I've flown too far to count the skies, but no gold, no toast, no crowd, no camera could match the hush you put inside my life. I don't chase much these days, but your shadows become my sun, and I'm smiling like a fool on a quiet stage, waiting for Act One to begin with just one come. So I'm waiting on the steps of desire, with my whole damn soul caught in the fire. You don't owe me a thing, but if you just appear, the rest of the world can disappear. Yes, I'll wait here, not weak, just true, 'cause I've